We still got some more, guys. Come fill in.
See? No, I told him I don't like. We were discussing the merits of a floorless mosquito. He was like, mosquitoes never in here.
I was sitting there like, there's not bugs up there, and I took a nap and woke up. There's all over me. There's a lot of bugs.
I'm gonna be doing videos. My face is just gonna be all this red pocket. Like,
I just put two right through his lungs and everything.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for coming. First off, did everyone get a ticket? Who did not get a ticket? You're just missing out on free stuff. So I just want to make sure everyone got a ticket. Everyone's good? Okay. Perfect. Well, we appreciate you guys coming. This is One Shot Gear. If this is the first time you guys have been here, we're just a small specialty store. Obviously, there's some downsides to a little boutique store. We appreciate you guys being okay with the tight space and all the people. We got Aaron, Chris Rowe, two experts in hunting, and we appreciate you guys coming up and take it from here.
thank you, sir. All right. First of all, thank you guys very much for coming. I mean, this is awesome. Last time, these guys were talking about maybe hoping to pull in 35, 40 people. So this is sweet. The other thing too is we're kicking it off now. We're going to try to keep it to about 2 hours, and we'll see if that lasts.
Chris could have talked Bin Laden out of hiding.
Exactly, that's my specialty. So exactly. So I don't know. That's why I'm going to let him talk first, and then I'll just fill in the gaps afterwards. But no, sir, Aaron will kick it off talking about backpacking and gear and essentially getting up the mountain. Obviously, the title of this talk is Backcountry Elk Hunting, and so that's kind of going to be the focus on that. We're going to try to burn through our stuff, just some of the highlights quickly, so that way we can leave plenty of time for questions and answers afterwards. I will speak for. I know you. You can get a hold of either one of us. He's through Kafaru. Rockslide, you're on rockslide.com as well. I've got rowhuntingresources.com. That's my play. You can get a hold of me anytime. You can get a hold of Aaron anytime to follow up with questions. And we'll have, and again, these guys are going to do some giveaways. Is that going to be at the end before the questions and answers? Absolutely. Okay. And then we've got some specials and other stuff for you too. So if you want, Aaron, kick it off and run with it. And
Yeah, well, one thing for me, I'm not the world's greatest trophy hunter for elk. I've shot a lot of elk. It's just I black out and I wake up and the quiver's empty and there's blood trails crossing blood trails, and I really don't remember what happened, but I did kill a lot of elk. And so my thing is more as the experience of backpack hunting. That's my thing. I like getting back there. Now, Chris and I talked earlier in the week about kind of what to discuss, and just the 3 bulls I've killed that were over 340 were all solo hunts, and that's mostly that I rely really heavily on physical ability more than I do calling. Like Chris is probably far and above knowledge-wise more of a caller than me, but I will outlast Chris in a physical adventure, and so for me, I rely heavily on that. That's what I do. So we're going to talk about, or I am solo backpack hunting for elk. It's not much different than with a buddy, other than getting the game out, and then kind of my strategy for hunting up high. I hunt elk above tree line or at tree line as much as I possibly can. Mostly that has to do with, that's really advantageous for a guy that's fit. If you're not fit, it's not good. So anyway, the big thing I would focus on first, obviously, is being fit if you're going to backpack hunt for elk. We're short on time, so as far as fitness goes, it's really the train to hunt stuff and everything like that's great. CrossFit's great, but I would strongly suggest get a backpack on your back, and you're probably not going to be flipping tires over when you're trying to kill an elk. So just try to do applied physical fitness with that. As far as gear goes, I'm not going to go through a huge long list, but the key thing I would, you want to be comfortable. You really can't kill an elk when you're in the truck or you're at the home. So comfortable boots, comfortable pack, clothing that's not cotton, focus things like that. Make sure that's dialed in, test it ahead of time, and then kind of figure out your parameters. I take a lot of phone calls from guys from the Midwest that, and I'm sure Chris does as well, that they watched a Primos video that they hunt by the road, right? But they think it's backpack hunting, or they have the idea that they play college football, so they're going to go on a 10-day backpack hunt. They catch, they take everything but the kitchen sink, and I'm sure the Colorado DOW relies heavily on this for income, and then they make it halfway up the trail and they go home. And Colorado DOWs make what, $500-700 for an out-of-state tag? $600 for an out-of-state tag. So I would say the big, if you can get dialed in on your gear for a solo hunt to take the minimum you need with the maximum comfort, that would be the best. And that's about all I guess I'll touch on gear till the Q&A part. For me, as far as what I do when I hunt up high above tree line, I rely heavily, like I said, go as far as I can, get away from people, but optics are a big thing for me. We talked about this in the sheep and goat orientation of the seminar. I glass all day long. I don't walk around all day long once I'm in where I want to be. I find where they're at, and then I go over however long that takes, and I shoot them. And generally we fill our tags in the first 2, 3, 4 days of season. By doing that, it's like 2011, we were in the Maroon Bells, and I don't even know that we blew a call. We shot 3 elk, one at 330, one at like 297, and one 5x5. And we literally we hiked in, we glassed, for half the day, figured out where these different groups of elk were. We walked over there, made sure the wind was right, and they walked out and we shot them. I'm not saying that's the best thing to do, and Chris is going to definitely, jump in on the calling aspect of it. But without the glass behind me to where I can see them all day long, picking apart, so buy the best glass that you can. I really strongly focus on figuring out where they are so I don't have to call too much. It's not because I can't call, it's just with over-the-counter elk, sometimes they do get pressured a bit. I'm not the best caller in the world, I'm a decent caller, so making the right sounds, which Chris will cover, I kind of like make sure and leave all that out, and then just blow a cow call a few times, and then it comes in and I shoot it. And it's worked really well for me. But if, with Chris, he's, yeah, there you go. So that is like my main focus. I would say though, solo-wise, the big problem I know guys will run into is they'll get an elk on the ground and they won't really know. They've never deboned one, they've never taken one out, they've never done anything like that. And so for the most part, anytime you're breaking down an elk, and I'm going to have Chris jump here in a second on this, if I'm far enough in solo that I've got an elk down that I can't make it in 1 or 2 trips, a lot of guys don't practice this, but I put the meat in a game bag, and I put that in a garbage bag, and I sink it in the creek, and it's like a 6-7 day fridge or freezer, or I'll bury it in snow. I would say, as far as game care goes, an ecothermal corridor is basically where everybody generally tries to hang their meat up. It's a cooler place than other sections of the woods. It's generally in a creek bottom or like a draw where wind blows through, and it's an area that's always cooler than anywhere else, and it's in the shade. You're probably only going to keep it in there in archery season 1 or 2 days before you start running into problems, depending upon how hot it is. Mm-hmm. But when we go in, like this year, there's a couple guys that are going with me this year in here. We got 9 tags in one unit with 3 guys, and more than most likely we'll end up with 9 animals on the ground, and that can be a problem physically. So we generally try to, we let the meat drain out of, or let the blood drain out of the meat, let it hang, do everything you're supposed to do. Once it's got cold to the core, we put those game bags in garbage bags, and then we sink them in the water. This is a very short, abbreviated version of this. If you debone it, the same thing goes. You can't just debone it, throw it in a game bag, throw it in the creek, or hang it up. You want to rotate the meat inside the game bag to make sure what's in the center of the bag gets to the outside so it's all cool. Otherwise, everything in the middle will stay warm and the meat will spoil. So you want to focus on really knowing what you're doing on things like that. I know you had talked about you've sunk it straight into the creek with no game bag.
Yeah, no, I am a firm believer of that, and I'm dead serious. The only difference between Aaron and I when we sat and checked is I don't use a garbage bag. I want, for me, whether I'm deboning it or whether I'm leaving the bone in. Now, for those of you who don't know my background, for the past 15 years now, I've had the good fortune of hunting horses. This year it changes just because of where I'm living now. I won't have horses, but I've always hunted with horses. And so literally I get an elk on the ground, I've got my little spot messenger, I hit my little help button there, and it goes to my wife, and literally she loads the horses, she rides up, we let her, and we just yay, and we ride out. It's awesome. But I will say, no, and I'm dead serious. The last 2 elk that I've killed, she has been at the parking lot trailhead by the time I get back there. I mean, literally, I cut it up, go, ooh, stash it, walk back, she's already there, I turn around, grab the horse, we load it up, and it's out. However, we did spend many years hunting down in south central Colorado, right on the New Mexico border, to where it's brutal. I mean, my biggest bull I killed, it was 96 degrees that day, and he landed on the southwest face of the mountain. I mean, you're talking about just flinging hide off of that thing and cutting it up and getting it cold, and that is one thing I think a lot of people do not realize, especially when you're talking about backcountry hunting, is what he just said. It's still going to be warm. That muscle mass is going to retain heat, and you can run into problems of meat loss a lot quicker than a lot of people think. And even though it might be cool out in the air, I want that 2 things. I want the core temperature to go down right now, but for me, I want to get that blood out of there too. You can cool your meat. Well, how many have ever had blood curtilage in an ice cold cooler, in cooler water, where you got ice and water and blood, and the blood can curdle, even though it's ice cold? So I sink it. I use high quality game bags. I don't use the cheesecloth game bags. They'll just let too much garbage, dirt, and junk get in there. But I use a high quality, what is it, a nylon mesh or whatever now, that it is somewhat breathable to where the water will flow through it, but garbage and sticks and dirt and silt and everything really doesn't. And I will just kabloosh. If I have to dam up the creek and create a hole, I will. And I will sink that sucker right in it, and I will either rotate that meat, or if it's on a bone in, I'll just leave it in there. And he's absolutely right. You can leave that in there for days. So Aron is the guy that throws the entire elk on his back and then hikes it out, comes back, gets your elk, puts it on his back, and then goes out. Me, I'm taking a back strap and whimpering, and then I go. So I need to take multiple trips. I know that. That's just me. I'm going to have to take multiple trips. You sink it in a creek, it will give you the time to do it, number 1. Number 2, when you pull it out and you throw it on your back, it's nice and cool. It feels really, really good. All right, so I'm with him on that. Sink it in a creek if you can.
And if some of you guys, like some people have an issue with that, and I've gotten plenty of haters on Facebook and Rockslide and everything else that tell me that you should never put meat in a garbage bag and it's horrible. I mean, you don't want an apple-scented Glad bag and throw it in there or whatever, a contractor bag. But I've been doing it, well, I'm almost 40 now, I hate to admit, so I've been doing it for a long time. I've never had an issue, not one time. The one thing I will say, on your kill kit, I use tag bags. They're out of Alaska. He's a buddy of mine, former Special Forces dude, super cool dude. Then there's caribou bags. Both of them are great game bags. They're synthetic. You can wash them. I take a Havalon knife or an outdoor edge knife with interchangeable blades. Take some ribbon. I have, think about how much stuff we're planning on shooting, but 4 game bags, let's say, and then 2 little scrap bags. Have some 550 cord, some rubber gloves. I can pretty much break down anything from a moose down to a whatever. It doesn't really matter with that kit. I just have a small little foldable knife. It doesn't take much. Once I debone, I always debone, which Chris is going to learn a lot about deboning this year and packing it back out. I use game bags that are fairly cylindrical, very small cylindrically, like the size of a basketball. The idea behind this is if you get a big game bag, especially the cheesecloth ones, which I wouldn't use, it just lumps up in the bottom of the bag and then it's uncomfortable to pack out. The cylindrical bags, as you load those, it basically imitates a bone-in quarter. So it stays, it can't sink down because you stuff it so full to the top. It doesn't sag. With those game bags, that's from Tag Bag makes those. They're called bomb bags. Those are a great option, but whatever you do, once you get it in that game bag, if you're not packing it out immediately, and I suggest to a lot of guys, if they're not packing out, to not pack it out immediately, give your body a break, let it sit overnight, rotate that meat, and let the blood drain out of it. The other thing that works really well, we'll do, if you don't want to sink it in a creek, we'll make kind of a makeshift, find a tree that's downed, get it above the water, but you have that cold air flowing through it, And then, we rock, paper, scissors it for which one of us has to go over, and we rotate the meat. So that way, it's not just, the big part is getting it all to cool. It's also, you don't want blood just pooling up in the middle of it. It'll find a way out eventually, get it to rotate. So if you kill the bull at 9 o'clock in the morning, and you're not real quick, and you're noon, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and the weather's not horribly bad, you got a cool spot to hang it. I mean, if that's your hunt, you're done with your hunt, you might as well enjoy the night in the woods and go tell stories and cook some backstrap and let the blood drain out. The meat will taste better in the long run. If you're doing multiple animals by yourself, which I'm stupid enough to do, you really you really want to take into consideration your physical ability. If you don't, generally in elk, you get 30% of the meat. 30%, if the elk weighs 1,000 pounds, you get 300 pounds of meat. It's across the board. It's never. I would say it's never wrong. Would you?
It's close enough to be. It's a good enough rule.
So yeah, I mean, if you kill 600-pound elk, you got 180 pounds of meat. If you don't think if you're going to need to take your gear, so mathematically you got 50 pounds of gear, and you can't take whatever the case may be, 90 pounds plus your 40 to 50 pounds of gear. If you can't handle 130, 40 pounds your first trip, you're probably going to need to make more than 2. If you need, yeah. Believe it or not, my partners and I, people didn't believe it till I tried it. You can cut a 800-pound elk up and take it out in one trip with your gear with 2 guys, but you need to know what you're doing and you need to be ready for some pain, but you can do it. Either way, if you drop one animal, whether it be a big elk or you drop multiple animals, you better start doing some serious mathematics of how long it's going to stay, what you can physically do to get in and out. Like I said, I'm not a trophy hunter. Maybe I wouldn't pack so much animals out if I was, but we'll generally shoot with 3 guys. I mean, in the course of a week or 2, we'll have 7, 9 animals on the ground, whether it's cows, bulls, or whatever. Each time we do that, we'll get example of the bear hunt that was just on in Idaho. We had 6 people with tags. Once 3 bears were on the ground, I cut sling load, and I'm like, you guys aren't shooting anything else. I'm like, this is it. Because I don't think we could have got it out, and I certainly didn't want to be the guy, me and Billy, the partner, to be going back in and get everybody else's bear. Bear meat's not that good anyway, so I'm adding it up on my fingers and toes, and I'm like, we got 170 pounds coming out. We're done. Like, this is it. And the guys that were with us weren't in good enough shape. I know a lot of guys that don't tell stories that I know of that have to leave meat because they just flat can't get out. Same thing goes, very well-known name I won't bring up, had to leave his sheep in the Sangres. He's under investigation right now, he's a fat guy, he couldn't get out, and he had to leave his meat. I strongly urge you to not worry about that, or to not get in a position where you have to worry about that, because you bite off more than you can chew. Not only you're leaving the meat, you're also probably going to get a ticket. So,
And I'll double down on that, because where I hunted down south, there was places you could hunt, and one of the good places to hunt was legitimately 8 miles back in, and that's where it started. And then it was 8 to 10 miles in. This particular canyon was just phenomenal. It used to be just phenomenal, and guys would get all excited about it, and they were like, "Man, we're going." Yeah, you can get there. That's fine. You've got the fitness level to get there. The question is, what do you do when you do get there? And there was a lot of guys that would say, "Oh, well, the bears got it." No, they just couldn't. And I will say that's the flip side of that. The reason why they left the meat is because they got a little greedy. They didn't know what they were getting themselves into, but they didn't realize the value of sinking that meat in the creek. There's a beautiful creek in there. It will hold it. It will keep it. And I've hunted in areas that are just littered with bears. We've never had a problem with bears getting into camp and finding the meat. I mean, you sink it, it just takes that scent right away. Unless that bear is getting his drink of water and sticks his nose in, oh, there it is. It will definitely help keep that meat longer. It will allow you to recuperate your body condition to where you can go back multiple trips, and you can get it all out and fill the freezer.
And while we're on the meat part, we talk about deboning, quartering. I pretty much only debone the meat. It's pretty hard to do without an elk in front of you, but the way that I do it's fairly simple. I just make a slit straight down the spine. Depending upon if you're going to cape it or not. If I'm going to cape it, I do the same thing. I go almost to the rear quarter, because your taxidermist will love you a lot more the more you leave. We'll just go over this for caping it. You go all the way around, split it up the back to the head. And then I don't make the Y cut like a lot of people do. When I go down the back, there's a couple different ways to do this. I just make an incision and I tube the elbows, tube the legs. And I'm not doing a great job at explaining this, but once the split's made down the back and I'm peeling it forward, you're going to cut the leg off anyway. I make a slit up of that, up the leg a little ways, and I tube the leg. So basically, as I'm peeling down the leg, the hide off of it, I'm pulling that arm out of the hide, just like your leg out of the sock. You don't have to do that, but your taxidermist will like you a lot better for it. If you're going to do a full body mount, you do the same thing. You go down the spine all the way basically to the tail, and then as far as on the full body, you just basically go from the hoof to get that cut off up, and you don't have to go much farther past the elbow. Once you get that off, you're inevitably you're tubing all four legs with minimal cuts to each leg. And again, I don't know if that makes any sense, but your taxidermist will love you. Like in the territories where I was last year, these are $25,000 sheep clients or more, and it is frowned upon to screw up. And so when you're tubing those, not that this is a huge deal, but capes, you don't want any fat left on the cape. It's not, especially if you're going to leave it back there and you don't have salt. So just not to get into it in depth with this, if you're leaving fat or meat on the cape and you have it back there for more than a day or two, it's back. You're going to start losing hair. Taxidermist isn't going to be able to fix it. I'm not a taxidermy expert, but I have seen some pretty crappy taxidermy jobs with hair falling out. It wasn't the taxidermist's fault. The guy that caped out the meat didn't do a good enough job. So make sure you get all the fat and all the meat when you're caping it. Skipping back to the deboning portion, I literally, it's as simple as it, the lines, when you're deboning, I leave the rear quarters on, and I debone them right off the quarter. I don't pull them off. The front quarters I'll cut off and debone them. If you have no idea what you're doing and you're freaking out, cut the biggest chunks you can off of it and throw them in the back. It's not going to hurt anything, but if you follow, there's tendon lines, or is it what is that called? Is it tendon? Yeah, there's tendon lines you follow, and that's how you get a rump roast and everything else. So as you're deboning it and you're like, wow, this is splitting apart, then that's telling you that's where you should have cut it at. And you can follow those lines very cleanly, even if you don't know what you're doing, just by kind of prodding around in there. Once you debone, I generally try to do 4 equal bags and then like a tenderloin backstrap bag. The 4 equal bags isn't, you're going to need to hang it if you don't put it, to drain it. You want to be able to handle it if you're solo. Most of the time I am. I don't know if there was YouTube, Facebook uploads of me the first time I tried it with a 120-pound game bag. You're trying to lift and pull at the same time. I've got the rope in my teeth. It's not a good sight. Try to keep those game bags around 80 pounds so you can handle them yourself or less if needed. The tenderloins and the back straps. The back strap's pretty simple. Just keep your blade along the spine, go all the way down. You're going to cut a 90-degree angle right across the vertebrae. Not really a difficult thing. You can screw it up, but not horribly bad. I've seen some hack jobs. But the tenderloins is where people get really confused when you're deboning. It's actually pretty simple. At the end of the back strap, underneath those vertebrae is your tenderloin. I've seen some pretty crazy and extrapolated ways to do this. It's as simple as just push the stomach down. The tenderloin's right there. The front part of the tenderloin that's going towards the head, you can actually cut it loose through the spine or through the vertebrae. So you don't have to reach your knife between the guts and inside the body cavity. You can actually go through the vertebrae. There's a slot there. Stick your knife in there, cut across, knead it with your hands. You get to the end of it, you're probably going to have to cut it off there. Keep your forearms down into the stomach so you're not popping that, which that ends up horrible. That's the way to do it. It doesn't take but probably 5 minutes to do both sides, or 5 minutes each side, maybe less. The big thing, you don't want to pop the gut bag because it's going to get on the tenderloin. So you want to make sure I dig in really deep with my forearms to push it down, and if you got a buddy, he can help. But you can almost pull them off with your hands normally. It comes out pretty clean. The deboning portion, I would say the big things you don't want to hit. When you get towards, when you're deboning and you're getting towards the rear joint, it's real close to the stomach, the gut bag. start to be careful because you can hit that gut bag, and if you've taken a while, it swells and it'll shoot all over you. There's actually some pretty funny YouTube videos of it blowing across people's faces. I generally takes tax, title, and license an hour and 15 minutes. If I don't have to cape the animal, it's 2 hours, 2.5 if I have to cape it, and I'm taking my time. What's it usually take you to debone one or quarter one?
A little bit longer, but yeah, about this. I mean, you're talking a few hours. For me, it's a few hours.
3 to 4.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you quarter them though, right?
Yeah. Oh, I quarter them, and yeah, I skip. And see, that's the thing. I do it a little bit different, but I'm gonna start playing around with that because I do need to cut my time down. But you plan on it's gonna take you a few hours. I mean, especially for someone who's never done it before, or if you're doing it by yourself. That's the thing. If you got a buddy that can hold legs and help you rock them up and it's gonna go a lot quicker.
550 cord is pretty handy for a solo hunter because I'll literally position the elk to where I'll tie his legs to trees so he's my hunting partner and he's helping me out. Otherwise, especially if it's on a side hill, it can become a crap show trying to get it done. It can be rough. That without having an animal in front of you, that's not the. I would just say don't get paranoid and don't panic. I've run into guys while I'm backpacking, backpack hunting that. Some amazing things. I'm like, how did you even think of that? Jam the knife right into the stomach. I'm like, what the hell are you doing? So, be careful when you get by anything that's gonna, obviously in the stomach area. Take your time, but make common sense choices. Like if you're cutting the meat off, just cut it in the largest chunks you can. Generally, the meat processor, he's gonna bitch at you anyway because it's deboned. None of them like it. Steve's. I never use Steve's anymore. He and I had a huge pissing match because he was trying to charge me extra for deboned meat, which is fine. I'm sure he's a great shop, but most of them don't like deboned meat anyway, so it's not going to be that big of a deal. And they're going to charge you for it anyway. So even if you cut it perfectly and you have no dirt on it, they usually charge you more because they're not the ones taking care of it. I don't know. Am I missing anything major other than that?
Right. All I would say is, listen, we just jump to the end when you kill it. I'm going to go back at some point when I'm going to talk about how we kill it.
Yeah.
What I wanted you to talk about real quick is, from you sitting behind glass, how much time do you actually spend watching them and figuring out what they're going to do, or do you just bomb in after? Because I think
spend a lot of time figuring out what they're going to do. And where we were at with the deboning and that's more of the gear / backpacking section that I'm good at, the killing. That's what I was talking about that. For me, even though I've got probably ADD, I'll watch them for an entire day before I even move in on just to be sure what they're doing. Most of the time they're doing the same thing every day. They're not doing a whole lot different. The one thing I will notice or will say is at the end of the day, and I've got an hour left, 45 minutes, they're 1,200 to 1,400 meters away. Probably not going over there. It's not worth it. Chance of me blowing them out. I don't know what else coming out. They're obviously more and more will keep feeding out of a wood line into an opening. Usually the bigger bulls especially come out at last light. If I just bomb straight over there, which Colton's not here, but he's one of our training partners. He's a prime example. He blew every animal, it sounds like, off the mountain last year on his hunt because he saw him, and he's all go, no quit, right? He's forward motion. He doesn't stop moving. And how many, 3, 4?
Yeah, he said a lot.
He missed a lot of elk, right? He literally, and the kids, he'll run himself to death like a dog. Like he blacked out last year. His vision closed up from chasing after elk at tree line, but he would see them and he would go. And he's physically able to do that. And he missed some, but he was breathing so hard when he shot. And I'm like, well, Colton, why didn't you just wait till later? And he was like, what if they ran away? I'm like, well, you missed them anyway, so you're not doing that to me. So if you don't have any other pressure, especially backpack hunting, you generally don't, or I haven't had that issue, I'll watch for 4 hours. I'll watch all night. I may even watch the next morning. In the case of like in 2011, which was one time we killed some decent bulls doing this, we watched them for a day and a half the first time before we moved over. So we knew where they were probably going. We knew exactly where they were coming out. And when we maneuvered over there, we actually camped below them by about 600 yards on kind of I guess you'd call it a bench where it's kind of terracing. And then we got close to dark where 45 minutes before dark, the wind was right. We walked over there, and my tall buddy Jay, some of you guys may have seen photos, he's like 6'10", he's a colonel in the Air Force. He missed 3 of them and killed the 4th, right? The elk didn't go anywhere. They didn't know what was going on. And then we came back in with 2 more guys and killed 2 more elk. but we literally knew exactly in that probably 800-meter square or maybe 1,200-meter square, there was multiple areas these elk were coming out of. Everywhere else has got hunters coming in from the road, so there's like a happy medium point where we were hunting at that time, and they were the safest right there. Even though Fred, their buddy, died, it's better than going down and running into 40 hunters, so they all hung out right there. So to answer your question, I glassed for a long time, and for mule deer, I'll drive people crazy. Same with sheep and goats. I'll glass for 14 hours straight, and I won't move. It served me well, but like I said, I rely a lot on physical ability. The biggest bull I shot, which you've seen, which is in your neck of the woods, I watched it for 2 days. I was a little bit heftier at that point. I wasn't quite as fit, and I was trying to talk myself into going over there. I finally went over there, and I called a little bit when I finally shot it, but the biggest thing is I waited to where he had a cow going to estrus. Once that cow went into estrus, he wasn't worried about anything but that cow. How I killed it is his satellite bull came between me and the bull, and then I bugled real hard. He charged in, and I shot him. That doesn't happen very often that way, but I spotted. I would never have killed that thing if I didn't have, good optics sitting there and glassing him. What about you? You're in the tree line.
Well, no, and that's it. I mean, in my opinion, when we're talking about backcountry elk hunting, most of the time we are talking about hunting the big mountains. You're talking, when people talk about backcountry, they're not usually talking about a mile off the road. You're talking several miles back in, which in Colorado means you're going to go into the mountains somewhere, usually a big mountains, which ends up two things are going to happen. Number one, you're going to deal with alpine areas, all right? And then number two, you've got migratory elk. Most of them are going to be migratory. They're going to be moving. They're going to go up to that summer area or up into that high country in the summer, and a lot of times they're going to be up on that alpine. And so you can end up running into situations where the elk literally stay up on those alpine meadows all day, they don't leave, because that's where it's safe. What Aaron's talking about, sitting behind glass, I do. To my fault, I love to call. I like to engage them. I like them standing from here to that fluorescent orange Sitka hat before I kill them. Okay? So I enjoy calling them. However, if you want to fill a tag, there are multiple different ways to do that. Dan Evans is probably, trophy taker. That guy's killed more big bulls than I can even imagine. I mean, the guy's got, I don't know how many big bulls. I don't think he calls at all.
57.
He does what Aaron does, and he just glasses, there they are. That's what they're doing. That's how they're doing it. And basically treat them like a mule deer. Where are they? Where are they going? Why are they going there? And how can I get in and position myself and get into the range and sniper them? All right? When we're dealing with elk that are out on that alpine, a lot of times that can be one of the best techniques to do. And so sitting behind glass and watching them, having some patience, can pay huge dividends. Because, and I'll say this for myself, I am not physically fit like Aaron to where I can run. I can get there. That's not a problem. And I can hunt all week or 2 weeks and be fine. But I'm going to take my time. I've got to take my time. So my whole thing and what I focus on my educational stuff is efficiency. Once I locate something, I'm not worried about what's over the next hill and that next hill, and I do usually not, and I'm going to contradict myself here in a minute because I'm going to talk about having a plan B option, but when I locate an elk, I don't in my back of my head, I'm not worried about a plan B option. I find an elk, I want to kill that elk, I'm going to kill that elk. Well, a couple things. I need to know what he's doing. And when you're talking about in the backcountry, if you've got elk that are coming out of the timber and going up in the alpine and up in those willow flats or up on these wide open slopes, if you have that movement between dark timber and the open, alpine, golden, because now you can capitalize on that movement. You can capitalize on them going from point A to point B, figure out where they're going in, figure out when they're going in, in the morning, when are they dropping down in to the timber. Most of the time, my experience, it's when the thermals start to switch. I've literally, where I hunt, a lot of times they will literally stay out in that open alpine slope until about 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, when all of a sudden those thermals switch and then it's coming out of the timber and it's just a mad dash. Down in the timber they go. But they will not approach it until that wind changes. But they go in very predictable little spots. And so if you can identify where those spots are, that's going to be huge. sitting behind good glass is going to help you, because then you don't have to keep running.
One thing I would say you really want to, if you're hunting in the high country above tree line, blowing a cow call behind the last tree is not a good idea. I need to throw in some asterisks or whatever, some fine print here. You do not want to call if you're at 11.5 and you're beside one little chunk or one rock, because the elk are going to look over and be like, where's the cow? There's no cow up here. And then they're going to run. Be careful with that. What Chris is talking about is exactly right. Figure out the pinpoint area they're going back in. I just wanted to throw that in because it happened 2 years ago to the same guy like 5 times, and he just could not call. There was elk around him. He just was like, I got to blow this call. I've got it in my pocket. And then the elk would look around for a couple minutes, and I could watch it in the spotting scope, and then they'll go back in the woods. Well, they figured out they can't see a cow. They need to see something. They need, when they know there should be something there. The thing with, I would say it's pretty 8, 9 o'clock usually is when they turn around and go back in. The big thing that you want to watch, and why I take so much time, is the time they go in and when I need to get there. Because if I get there too late or too early, they're going to run away anyway because I blew them out with wind. So that's one of the reasons I glass for so long, is to make an approach. And if it's a stock where I'm not going to plan on calling at all, I literally, as crazy as this sounds, and I don't want to get it mixed up with my tattoo, I'll draw a map on my forearm. Because if I'm glassing from a mile away or a half mile away, I'll kind of draw a map of an idea of how when I want to get in there. Because it never looks the same when you're over there. But if I know there's, I come out in this point and I know I've come out at the correct point that I wanted to, I'll have a decent idea of what I've got to hide behind on the way over there. I know it seems semi-complex to go shoot an elk, but when he's talking about plan Bs, I have plan Bs no matter what, because from where I glass from, I can see elk everywhere. And you're in the same spot, you hunt the same area up, there's a lot of elk up high. You can see them in every different direction. A plan B is pretty easy because I can see a plan B to my right and my left, so when I screw up plan A, if it happens, plan B's over here. And that's why I like hunting in the high country so much up above tree line, is you're not wondering, we're in the woods, if you're not calling, it sucks. You're cold calling and hoping one comes in. There's always action when I hunt up high.
Well, and I guess that's why I said I was going to contradict myself. Yes, I always have a plan B and what I'm going to do next if it doesn't work out. But the thing, and I think you've, well, heck, we talked about it with Jay Scott, and I think you and I've talked about it before, is where if you don't feel confident in going into something, you just say, well, I'm going to just try this. But you're not committed. You don't feel that you're confident in your abilities. I don't think people go in and take it seriously and go all in like I think you do on because you know your abilities, you know what you can do. I know what I can do with my abilities with calling. My guess when I say with plan B is, if I see a bull and I want to kill that bull, that's my world right now. That is the one that I'm gonna go after, and I'm gonna go in, make my stalk. If that does not work, then okay, I'm either going to back out and wait for him later on if he's a good bull, or then if I blow him out of there, then I will go to plan B. But my whole thing is, for my philosophy is efficiency. I don't want to blow him out of there, because some of the places where I hunt, I might go 4, 5, 6 miles back in and literally get there and go, dang it, they already left. Because that's the other thing with a migratory herd that folks have got to understand. Right now, I think both of us talk about early, going out there opening day and the first couple days of season. What people have to realize is some of these herds do not stay on that summer range very long into September. One area that I hunt that I've killed a couple bulls out of now, literally you could set your calendar. If you lived in the wilderness and had no idea what day of the year it was, you could tell come about August 28th to the August 30th, because there'd be 200 elk on that side of the hill. August 27th and August 28th, all of a sudden there's fewer, and by August 30th they're gone. There might be one bull with his cows. The rest of them have packed up and moved out and gone. And a lot of people will talk about that pre-rut move, where they will actually head out of those areas. Now, that can be because of hunter pressure. That could be because of competition between other bulls. That can be because of the cows and they want to move to better habitat. Depends on what the weather's looking like. There's all sorts of different variables on how long elk are going to stay up in that high country basin. If they are wanting to be there and you don't blow them out of there, they can be there for a week, 2 weeks, or whatever, and just stay, and you can work them multiple times. But if you're your buddy
Yeah.
blow them out.
The areas I hunt, the elk don't leave above tree line, and it until after September. I mean, they're there the whole time. Safety, right?
Yeah.
Outfitters are below, and there's tons of hunters, and people are freaked out when they see all the people at the trail. I depend on that to where I hunt. I depend on the trailhead being full. I'm like, all right, great, because I'm gonna out hike them, and I'm gonna go higher. So where I hunt, you know, which should tell you something. When I don't draw a tag, this is over the counter areas where I hunt, like in the Sangres, 13,000 feet, September 20th. There's going to be a 340 bull with about 40 cows up there in one patch, and then there's going to be another bull over here on a different open patch up high. And there's elk down lower. They don't all stay up high, but I focus up higher when I don't want the competition of, you know, the outfitters and everything else down low. So I will say that Chris is 100% correct, but I have found multiple areas where I can stay up high. And I just like hunting at tree line or whatever. It's cooler for me. Now, one thing with Chris, as far as the calling goes, when I draw a tag, I'll say I call up a storm when I draw a tag. When I'm in an area that's less pressured and you can call more, I call all the time. Now, I know these are questions I get a ton, because when I'm up high, I don't call very much. I get guys that shoot me PMs constantly. How many times do you bugle when you're hunting in the timber? How many do you bugle? Once an hour, once a minute, once? Because like Corey Jacobson, that guy bugles. I've hunted beside him. It's annoying. I mean, he's a great guy, but he'll bugle every 2 minutes. I mean, he'll bugle all day. I mean, he kills stuff. It works for him, but he will blow on that bugle so much his lip gets raw from touching the tube. It is insane.
But I will say, and I like Corey. I'm friends with Corey too, and the guy's phenomenal. If you don't know who Corey Jacobson is, he's like the 80th time Grand National champ. He usually wins the elk calling championships for the RMEF calling championships. So the guy can call. But he even said in a recent podcast, he is very similar with his athletic ability and what he wants. He even said this flat point. He will run by 10 different elk to find the one that wants to work a bugle. All right? And that is where I am different. And I have a completely different philosophy. If I'm in a valley that has 10 different bulls, I will go from one to the next and I will work them until I find the one I want to kill. If this one needs to be worked with a bugle, great, I'll work him. If that one wants to work with a cow call, I'll work him. So there's different philosophies, but you're absolutely right. You know, people all the time ask me, you know, how do you call, when do you call? If I am up in the high country, number one, well, I guess let's take a step back. Let's ask you guys, how many hunt backcountry elk right now, year in and year out? Raise your hand, seriously. Okay. I'm going to say under 3 miles back in.
Some.
Okay. Most everybody's, you're going past 3 miles. You're going back in there, right? Are you doing just a weekend hunt, or are you doing a full week? Full week. All right. So you got people. So we're talking about moving into. How many are hunting the same area year in and year out? Okay, most of us. Okay, let's flip it then. How many are going to a new area this year, or looking to go to a different area? Okay. All right. So you've got a little bit of variety. You know, if you are hunting if you're going way the heck back in there and you have history, you've gone and hunted it for 2 or 3 years. The beautiful thing about that is you start to know what the elk are going to do. Aaron, he already knows that he's relying on all the pressure down low to push him up high. In the area that I hunt, it is literally just the opposite. We've got more people going into the backcountry now because it's so popular with mule deer and everything else that literally the elk have been conditioned, wear out, and there is a tiny little, in this one particular spot, there's a tiny little chunk of private. And I mean, it is a postage stamp, but it's a tiny chunk of private that doesn't allow anybody to hunt, and they all bail off the mountain and go right into it. It makes Estes Park look stupid. I mean, there's just bulls going crazy, but you will not be able to get them off of there, okay? So if you do have those situations where you've got elk, then man, you absolutely spend some time and watch them and get them patterned, because then you'll be able to hunt. They're not going anywhere. But that's not every herd. That's not every population. So if you are hunting in an area where you go, yeah, I was up here August preseason scouting, and I saw 200 over on this hill, and I saw a couple really good bulls down here, but then you get there opening day or the night before season, and you look up and you're like, wait a minute, I don't see a lot of elk. This is where you need to start making notes and understanding your specific area, and that's where I say, I do say a plan B, because I know where I hunt, I've got a short window. I have a very narrow window to hit them when they're up on their summer range, when they're still up on the alpine, where they're predictable. I've got maybe 2 or 3 days to work them, and then they're good. Even if other people aren't there, they're going to be moving, and they're going to be starting to head down that mountain. For me, where I hunt, and what I tell people, if you get there and the elk are leaving, the first place I'm going to look is, where are the calving areas? Where were the cows previously in the spring giving birth? Because and those are usually lower down on the mountain. It still might be 4 miles back in, 5 miles back in, but it's not up on that alpine slope. They're down in the aspens or down in the timber a little bit. All of the factors that a cow is looking for when she is calving, when she's giving birth, security, food, water, all in a tight little spot, are all the exact same factors that a bull and his harem want when he wants to sequester his ladies.
Generally where they shed, too.
That's the same, exactly.
Where their antlers fall off will be the same area Chris is talking
Very
about.
similar, exactly. So get on, there's all sorts of different mapping software out there, and mapping. I use Hunt Data CD, those guys, and I'm not they don't owe me a dime, I don't owe them a dime, I just use their product. Hunt Data CD, they actually have all the DOW maps where it says the summer range and winter range and calving areas and everything else, movement corridors, but they have it bundled to where it'll actually integrate with Google Earth, and then you can put it on your phone. It gives you a lot of information to understand, to where you say, okay, if the elk are up on the alpine and I can use binoculars to find them, then I'm going to do exactly what Aron is doing. The only thing different is I work my way in and I start using a call, because I just enjoy doing that. But if they are not there and I cannot glass them, then I'm going to have to go in, and I'm going to have to go in and find them. If they're vocal, great. You can hear one, you can move in and you try to work them. But for me, my philosophy, I talk all the time about very targeted strategies. I am not one that just wants to throw out a bunch of cow calls. I just don't go out there and just randomly make vocalizations. My entire website is about understanding what it is that you're actually saying. And I think if folks take some time and realize that, if you sit and watch those cows and calves up on the summer range, yes, there are going to be small amounts of time where they're going to be making noise and they're going to be talking with one another. But there are just huge amounts of time where they don't say anything. They're not just out there just yapping their gums for no reason. If you have horses, if you have cattle, if you've ever been around any sort of livestock or whatever, you know that cows, moo cows, cattle cows, they're just not out there bellowing for no reason. Horses in the back pasture aren't out there just whinnying for no reason. You take one out of the herd, though, you put a halter on one and start leaving it out, or you take the calves out of the cattle, they start losing their minds. Because something has changed. Something in that herd dynamic has changed. And so when they start vocalizing, they are going to be using very specific words. There are some hunters that believe, it doesn't matter, I'm just going to throw out calls and I'm going to try to sound really good. I'm going to try to make my cow sounds sound very realistic. I'm going to use high quality calls, but I'm just going to throw calls out there. And there's the other school of thought, like me, that says, I'm going to use very specific vocalizations for a very targeted purpose. I'm going to tell that elk exactly what to do. For me, about being, and again, I am not as physically fit to be able to run those mountains and run those basins. And so when I see an elk and I work my way over to him, I want to maximize my ability to kill that elk. I might be up there and have 10 bulls I'm looking at. I'm going to go pick the biggest one, and I'm going to put all my, I won't say eggs in one basket, but I'm going to put all my effort into making sure that I can kill that bull. And he's right. If they're out on that open alpine, sometimes that is the most frustrating, impossible situation that you can deal with, because they're out there because they can see everything. I talk about the doorway, and it's just like our house. If you look at how we engage one another and how we, move across our house, if our spouse or girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever, or significant other or kids are in another room, when they call to us and say, hey, can you come here, we don't just walk right up to them. Most of the time, if we think about what we do, we walk through the house, wherever we know where they are. We don't go to the back. If they're in the back bedroom, we don't go to the garage looking for them, unless we're trying to, ignore them or avoid them. But if they call to us from the back bedroom, we know where that is. We heard it, we know where that is. Elk are no different. But when we walk across our house and we get there, we don't just usually walk in and right up to them, if you think about it. Most of the time we walk in and we will stop in the doorway or in that threshold of that room, and even if it's for that much, we'll try to make visual contact. We'll try to make eye contact with them and evaluate. Elk are no different, but when they get themselves out on those alpine slopes, they're doing so because it's safe. They can see everything around them.
Big doorway.
It's huge. And so, like he's saying, if there's one little tree poked out there, it doesn't matter if you can snake your way up through the willows and up through it and get to behind this tree and you're 100 yards back, you go, meow. He's going to, most 99.9% of the time, unless you're going to call in a satellite bull, he's going to stand there and look and go, okay, step out. Because another thing I talk about is to see you first, hear you second, smell you third. Elk are visual. They want to rely on their visual communication first and foremost, period. If they can't rely on that, they don't get the information from that, they will rely then on audible, vocalizations. If those two things don't work, then they will try to go and get their nose working. All right, now we're talking about communication, we're not talking about safety. Safety is completely the other way around. So when they're up on those alpine slopes, again, see you first. They want to make visual contact. Well, if some cow is all the way up on this mountain, up on this bare slope, and she's standing her stupid self behind a single tree, she's not going to do that. She's going to step out at some point and feed, and boom, visual contact, and then the bull can carry on. So when they're out on those open slopes, sometimes calling can be your worst enemy, because all it does is say, someone's there. Bull goes, okay, where are you? And he stands there and stares at you, and then you don't show up, and either one of two things is going to happen. Either he's going to go, nope, that's danger, that's something's not right with that situation, and I'm out. Or, if he stays there and he feels safe, he's like, she must not be talking to me, I'm just going to continue doing what I'm doing. Now, while we're sitting here talking about, call-shy bulls or bulls that are on edge, that's fine if you're dealing with a 5, 6, 7-year-old, a nice mature bull. But if you think a lot of the bulls that most of us are running around, you're talking about 2.5-year-old, maybe a 3.5-year-old bull. It's a young bull. How educated really is he? However, that cow that he's with standing up there is 16 years old, or 20 years old. I know that from the elk study. We collared elk in the mid-90s with big honking radio collars and big placards and big old shiny ear tags. I literally went back and we trapped and collared them as adults. So they're 6, 8, whatever, how old they are. I went back 10 and 12 years later, and the same cows are running around the same sinking summer range giving birth to calves. So, you can have 15, 20-year-old cows. How educated are they? So most of the time, it's the cows for me, that end up screwing me up, because there are all these eyes out there, okay? So when Aron's talking about going and sitting, if you're talking about high country elk and you're talking about hunting elk that are on that alpine, man, if they are out there and they are predictable, spend some time behind your binoculars and watch them to figure out what they're doing and where they are vulnerable.
Well, just because I hunt with guys that trying to help them out sometimes after I fill my tags, and almost guaranteed, and you can watch in the binoculars, there's other issues too. Let's say he's in an approachable spot where a guy sees the herd, the wind's right, he gets on the edge of the timber, just inside of it, he's going to catch him moving in. Let's say those elk, they're not within shootable distance, so he's going to want to call. The way that I look at this and the way I try to explain it to people, and Chris is much better at this, but when you walk into a bar and you're trying to pick up a chick, you generally don't go, hey, let's go! They're going to run. What the hell is wrong with this guy? You probably don't want to blow your cow call that way either, because there's going to be, that's an alert call. That's like, oh, God, this chick is psychotic, I'm going home. Same principle. You don't want to blow, and I keep it way simpler than Chris does. I just don't have his in-depth knowledge, but I have common sense. And, for example, early in the season, what most people would call an estrus call or a hyper cow call.
Garbage.
Yeah. We can go back and forth on it. You generally don't want to blow on that thing like it's going out of style the first couple of days of season, because they're not really going to know what's going on anyway. And now, Chris, and keep in mind I'm friends with multiple elk callers all over the world, and if they were all standing here right here with me, it'd be like the New York taxi cab drivers. I mean, I get to listen to them all bitch to me about how they're all wrong. So it's almost like religion, literally.
But mine's right.
Exactly. Right? You know, you've got multiple religions. Most of them have the same God, and they all think the other one's wrong. Chris is no different than Corey, Jason Phelps. I can list them off. Whoever it be, they all kill elk, right? They all name it different names. They all have. He was talking about a podcast. Another friend of mine did, and he's like, "That's not right. That's not right." I think in the end, they probably all mean close to the same thing. It's the terminology. Chris has broken it down scientifically, where I just say I blow on an estrus call. Chris, I'll have what? That's not it. That's not what it's called. Well, chill, Chris. I just call it something different than you. We're doing the same thing. It has to work. And I didn't mean to oversimplify the first portion of this, but physical ability is a big one for me. I don't want to do anything too stupid because I probably just don't have the confidence and the in-depth ability that Chris has to call. Now, Jeremy and I have hunted together for years, and how many elks have I called in for you? Would you guess? A lot, hundreds. I mean, maybe 100. I've called them in from 500 yards away. We can watch them the whole way. So I'm not incapable of calling, but those elk are in a draw unit that haven't been shot at a whole lot, and they haven't been called to a whole lot. And I don't know what Chris would say about this, but those elk they're pretty stupid. I mean, nothing against the
No, they
Primos
can't. No,
guys,
you're absolutely right. They are a different behavioral level because they haven't been conditioned
yeah,
the way other ones have.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like you go to a kid with a happy home. He's happy, he's grabbing cookies, he's going to watch TV. You go to a kid that has an abused home, he's shell-shocked, he's coming into like, am I getting beaten today? Well, fling a few arrows at an elk, he's going to probably be a little shell-shocked. I would be too. So I keep it a little bit calmer. Now, Chris and I talk all the time now where I'm going to implement a few things differently than physical ability and my shooting ability. But I can say that if you get overly excited, try to take it down a couple notches, because one of the number one, other than over-calling, would be the wrong pitch, because you scream on a cow call. I literally take it as like if you go to talk to a woman and you want to get her phone number, you're probably not going to be like, hey, give me your number. And that literally, I've watched guys do that, and the elk just take off. And maybe it's the too high of a pitch, and I'll shut up now and let Chris talk about that because he's much better than I am.
Well, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, the problem is, and this is where, and he's right. Everybody has their own opinions, and everybody has their own styles.
He's holding two estrus calls, as he said there, John. Those are both estrus calls in the normal world of elk hunting. What did that package say on that?
Do you need me to bring up the coup name?
Now, he works with Primos, and on that call,
No, well,
it says estrus call.
No, it does not. No, it does not. No, these are actually Steve Chappell's ones. But he does. He even said he talks about it as you'll hear people talk about estrus view, estrus wine, estrus scream, estrus buzz, estrus blah blah blah. I can tell you improved on our website. That's what I do. All my stuff is video. I could flap my gums, but I spend a lot of time behind the camera, just recording elk behavior, elk vocalizations, elk communication, and what they do, why they do it, and how they do it. And that is where we joke. He's absolutely right. There's all sorts of ways to skin a cat, and there's all sorts of ways to call an elk. However, with me, two things shaped my philosophy. Three, I guess. One, I always, 99.9% of the time, I'm over-the-counter unit, public ground, period. I have to hunt with a whole pile of other different people out there, all right? Number two, I'm a solo hunter, so I have to call the animal, and I got to put it in my lap. A lot of other people that talk about calling they'll talk about calling, but almost every one of them uses a two-person setup or a multiple setup where one person's out front and another person's calling from back. That's phenomenal. It works. If you have the ability to do that, absolutely do that. The reason why everybody does it is because it is extremely successful. However, if I'm going by myself, obviously there is no one else there behind me calling, so I've had to learn to figure out how to put it right here. The other thing, those right there are the two big ones. Well, and I guess the third one was, when I started cutting my teeth and figuring out how to do this on public ground, I was a college student, and I literally had a weekend. I would pack in, I would leave school or leave work Friday afternoon, get to the trailhead at 11 p.m., hike in. I'd get there about 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I would hunt Saturday, Sunday morning, and bail because I couldn't. There's no way I was going to be able to get an elk out if I shot it Sunday afternoon. So I had like a day and a half. Now, yeah, I could come back next week, but I had a day and a half to capitalize on it. And my issue at the time was, yeah, I'd see people just throwing stuff at the wall, calling too much or calling too loud or whatever, and blowing the elk out. Well, great. Now I gotta go try to find another elk. To where my philosophy started going, okay, this is ridiculous. I want to find one. I want to work them. I want to get in and call them. And where my philosophy comes from is, I go back to, okay, what are the elk actually saying? Why are they saying it? And what does it mean? Because he's absolutely right. There's a lot of people, we hear people talk about all the time of, I want to sound like an elk, or I want to sound like a bunch of elk. Well, my response is, doing what? I can take you to Estes Park in the middle of the winter and park you in front of 300 head of elk, and the only thing you're going to hear is magpies. Because they're all within visual contact with one another, they're all doing the same thing, and they don't need to vocalize. Whereas I can take you in some other areas, and there might be a cow with a calf, and she's separated, and it sounds like the whole world's coming apart. There's only 2 of them. What I focus on, and that's my website, is, okay, what are they saying and why are they saying it? When I'm talking about efficiency, I really do talk about a targeted strategy. I usually do not go out there and just start throwing calls out. Because, and his example's perfect, for if you're up on that alpine, people are talking about using chirps and mews. And just going off and calling a lot. Or they'll call loud, or they'll hit that estrus or whatever, the okay, really loud, long, drawn-out vocalizations. Now, we joke, I can show you why that doesn't even exist, but as far as estrus goes, it's a vocalization, it means nothing with estrus, and it can work. But when you're out there on the alpine, what people don't realize is when you're doing chirps and mews have a very specific connotation. The chirps and mews are used, they are legit vocalizations. They are used when cows and calves are talking with one another, and they are definitely used when they're excited. The problem is the chirps and mews do not talk to anybody outside the group. So if I'm doing chirps and mews and I'm sounding like multiple animals, I'm actually not speaking to the elk that I'm looking at. I'm actually speaking to the group that I'm pretending to be. Chirps and mews are used internally. So if this group right here, he's the bull, we're the bunch of calves, okay? He's an okay bull. We'll settle for him for now until we can find a better one. But if he's our bull, all right, he can be bugling, doing all he cares about and wants to do. But if all of a sudden we lose track of one another, or, we've got a calf that's, separated and we want to keep tabs, we start chirping and mewing. It does not matter if there's other elk out here or other bulls over there doing it. We're not talking to them, all right? So when a bull hears that, when he talked about the elk just take off and run, yes, when a bull hears that, number one, if you're doing a bunch of chirps and mews, that means a number of things. Number one, there's more than one animal. If there's more than one animal and they're vocalizing like that, they're up on their feet. If they're up on their feet, they're doing something. That means if they're up on their feet and talking, that means they're not able to keep track of one another. Well, if they're not able to keep track of one another, typically that means they're separated and moving. Okay, I'm a bull, I'm standing on this mountainside, I hear meow, 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 meow. Boom, they're down there. Where are the multiple animals? Where is the movement? Because that's what I'm hearing. Now, I don't have to vocalize, I don't have to respond, I don't have to do anything because chirps and mews aren't talking to me, but I'm seeing a picture in my mind that there should be multiple animals down there, there should be movement and activity. And they don't see that, boom, something's wrong. Now, a young satellite bull that's on the fringe edge and on their willows or somewhere else, he's like, ho, 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 I'm going to be over there, and he'll come running in because in some cases it's the best interest. You can never make an elk do anything except maybe run away. All you can do is put in his head what he ought to do, what might be in his best interest. Well, we go back to the see you first principle. They want to make visual eye contact. Well, that young bull is down there. He hears all that going on. He looks at the big bull up the hill, though he's just standing there like a stone. He's like, I'm going to go over there, I'm going to run in, and I'm going to make visual eye contact. Well, it's great if you've got good cover and you've got the wind right and you can kill a satellite bull. But when you're dealing with some of those bulls that are up on that open slope, what you say absolutely relays a very specific connotation. It's going to put a very specific image in their mind, and they better see it, otherwise it's wrong. And so when I talk about going in a very targeted way, I won't be throwing out a lot of calls. I might make 2 or 3 vocalizations, and that's it. Seriously. I might work myself to that tree, or I might work myself into the willows down below him, and maybe I'll just do a lost mew. Okay, I won't do 3 of them in a row, but I might, it holds that high note and then drops off the end. Throw out a lost mew. Lost mew is a legitimate vocalization. It's used by elk when they are separated and they're looking for another animal. The problem is, what people don't realize is, it asks for a response. It does not ask for an action. That bull, he bugles at you. Good, he did exactly what you asked him to do, but you did not ask him to move from his location. However, what that does do for me, it opens that channel of communication up, back and forth. From there, now, just like Aron is going to do, Aaron's going to work his way in as close as he possibly can. If you can work your way into 10 yards, you work your way into 10 yards and shoot him. If you can work your way into 80 yards, you work your way into 80 yards. But if you work your way in as close as you can, and for me, if that's under 100 yards, a lot of times I won't try to push the issue and try to sneak any closer. Because if I look at the situation and that bull is relaxed, he's calm, his cows are safe, a lot of times I will work my way in, try to get myself under that 100 yards, and then I will flip it and use a vocalization. I call it an assembly mew. It's a vocalization that a cow will use when she wants to either call her calf to her, or another cow to her, or whether she wants a bull to come to her. It's saying, I want you to come to me. It's not asking for a response. It's asking for an action. All right? And you'll see on all my videos, when I talk about a targeted strategy, I'm talking about a lost mew, an assembly mew, and a whole bunch of other different vocalizations we can talk about later. But those are my bread and butter, because that assembly mew, okay, drags out that low note, says, I want you to come to me. It's not asking for a response. And literally, if you can go in, for me, in my experience, get in close, get in under that 100 yards, let them relax, let them settle down. That bull's going to want to keep track of them, but I will slip myself in. I will open a channel of communication up with that lost mew, get him to respond, because I ask, where are you? I'm over here. Excellent. Gotcha. I will work my way, get close enough, and then I'll just start hitting those assembly mews. Come here. Come here. And I used to be with Primos, and I helped kind of develop the tone converter. The point behind this little thing right here is it does make it quieter, yes, but it also reproduces how a cow sounds when she vocalizes and keeps her mouth shut. Cows can vocalize, elk can vocalize 2 different ways. Either open their mouth and send it out very loud, yeah, or close their mouth, send that sound out through their nasal cavity, which is a lot quieter, but it changes the tonal quality a little bit. That's what this does. Okay, so when I do my assembly mews, I will send it out that way because now it sounds like a mature cow. It's not a calf, it's not a young cow, it's a mature cow. Bulls listen to mature cows. And so when I go up there and I go, I want you to come here. A lot of times he's going to look up and he's going to bugle. I didn't ask for a response, I want you to come here. He's going to look, he's probably going to bugle because his cows are there, I'm down there. Didn't ask for you to come here. And that has been my #1 success, whether I'm up in the alpine, whether I'm in the timber, whatever. Being very targeted and strategic with what I'm saying. I don't say a lot. Because the other thing that I've noticed, and Aron hit it dead on the nails, nuts in the fact that if all of a sudden you go out there and you start calling loud and you start throwing stuff out there and just hoping to see what sticks, if you set that animal off, if those cows get a little worried, a lot of times they're going to run further up on that slope. Or they're going to just start moving down that mountainside or down that alpine bowl or whatever. And literally I've watched and I've had it, and I've got a video I'm loading up this year where I missed a bull. We had bumped him a couple times, very, very mildly. It was all alpine stuff, but at least where these were, it was all tall willows, so you could use the willows as cover. And I ended up, I finally called the bull in, shot, and made just a boneheaded mistake, shot underneath him. Elk took off, turns around, stops. I got to do the responsible thing. I need to go follow up. I need to go find my arrow, make sure. So I think everything's clear. I step out there to go find my arrow. I look, and all of a sudden, all the cows are like, and there it was. That was it. And I literally watched and videoed them things run all the way down this. I mean, they went way up in the Alpine, went all the way down that valley, crossed over, went way up on the other side, and literally went right around, and then literally left the mountain. Gone. If it hadn't been open Alpine, I would have never seen it. Gone. Done. There it is. So hunt's over. Now, luckily, there were some other elk in there, and the next day I killed one. But you can end up blowing elk out of there. And if you're like me, or an average non-superhero, fitness guy, there's no way that I was going to be able to pack up camp and run, because literally from where I was to where the elk disappeared, I've done it. It's another hour walk, another hour hike, and then from where those elk went into is another probably a 30-minute hike to get in. I was going to have to, and I was already 2 hours from camp, and so I'm like, there's no way, not with my physical ability. So I really do try to be targeted and very strategic in what I say, because I don't want to blow them out of there. I don't. Some of the areas that I hunt with over-the-counter, I might get in there one year, and yep, there's one bull and his cows, and that's fine. I'll hunt him, and if it doesn't work, then I'll have to go to another valley. I'll move camp. I'll do something else, something different. But I really do focus on efficiency. And for you said about bugling, for me, if I have to bugle, and I get the same questions all the time too. How many times do you call? How many bugles? I never throw stuff out there just willy-nilly unless I'm just prospecting. And then even then when I'm prospecting, I will just use a contact bugle, just that, and we've all heard it. I could probably I can blow on it. I split them out in kind of 3 different levels just to keep things easy, but I mean most of the time it's this right here. Send it out and wait and just listen. That right there, if you listen to the structure of that, this exact same thing as a lost mute, except a bull's doing it. Holds that high note, accentuates that high note, and then falls off at the end. And they can do, you can do the 3 to the bar. You can, start low and hold it high and then fall off. You can add chuckles to the end of it, whatever. But they all hold that high note, number one, and they don't have a lot of growl to it. And that's one thing that I hear a lot of guys doing, especially early season. They do like that gnarly, what I call dominant bugles, those challenge bugles that some people will say. Most of the time, 99% of the time, if we're talking about early season, opening weekend in the first week of season, most bulls are not doing that. They're doing contact bugles. They might have a real deep, breathy sound to them. They might sound awesome, but they're not. Okay, you go out there and you do that. It's the same thing as some guy walking into a bar, just, who wants to fight me? You might have some guy in there going, sure, let's do it. Most other people are like, dude, what the, and they just clear out, all right? If you use a contact bugle and just send that is asking for a response, because that's what I want. I want them to vocalize and give me a response. From there, if I get a response, great. I'll pinpoint it and I'll move in. If I don't get a response, I'll give it some time, and I'll do it again. And people ask all the time, well, how long do I wait? Well, for me, what's going on around me? We've all been out there some days where, the squirrels are running around, the birds are chirping and singing and going, everything's alive, and it's just things are happening. Well, if that's the case, then I might send out a contact bugle, level 1, just send it out there, wait a minute, send out another one, wait a minute, send out a third one. If nothing, I'm on the move. Other days, you don't even want to step on wet grass because it's too stinking noisy. It's just dead quiet, nothing moving, nothing saying anything. I may wait 10 minutes in between me vocalizing. The other thing that I will do to make sure that I'm a little bit better than everybody else out there and hopefully get a response, I almost never call from a pack trail. I almost never call from the top of a ridge. I am always going to work myself into a position where it makes the most sense of where the elk are going to be at that time where they would most likely vocalize. So, I might be hiking up a trail and I'm interested in where the elk are. I'm not going to call from the trail because where I hunt, there's probably already been 15 guys that have already done that. All right? So I'm going to get off that trail, I'm going to climb that hill a little ways, get myself onto a little bench, get myself up off of that, and then I will try it. Again, people, in my opinion, the number one thing that people underestimate with elk, whether it's backcountry or otherwise, is their ability to pinpoint you. They know where you are. I've got 16 hours worth of video to prove that now on the website. They know where you are. And even though you called now, 5 minutes later he shows up and he's going to be standing right here going, sniffing around trying to figure out where she was, because he knows where you are. So if you call from that pack trail, he knows it's on the pack trail. You call from 200 meters above or yards above the pack trail, he knows that. Most people call from the pack trail, or most people call from the ridge line. If you get yourself off that ridge line into their zone and try it, you have a much higher level of success of getting a response. And then if I don't get a response, I'm not going to stay put, because a bull's not going to do that. A bull, if I don't get a response after 2 or 3 tries, I'm at least going to go
Let's look at this
300-400 yards.
What if you run out of room? Like, which happens, like where we were at last year. You can only go 300 to 400 yards so many times before you're just like,
Back in the same spot.
hey, but there's elk there. You've seen them there. So what do you do? I mean, this is
Okay,
a legitimate question.
Yep, absolutely. Then if that's it, are you talking about bugling and they didn't get a response?
I know what I do, because you can only go so far before you're scared. You tracked your scent all over
Everything.
Hell's Half Acre,
But you're talking
which
about
I don't do
they didn't respond to a bugle.
the whole morning.
Okay, then I'm gonna
Quiet.
then what I'm gonna say is that
You cold call.
absolutely, but I will put I'll put the bugle away. If they're not gonna respond to a bugle,
That's what I was getting at.
yeah, put it away.
Bugle up.
Just put it away. Do not just say, well, shoot, I must need to double down.
Yeah.
And just go down. No, that does not work that way. I'm telling you, it doesn't. My best, and I've got to share a story. You share a story. I've got to share a story, because this one, I'm not exaggerating on any level of the story. Please trust me on this. I did not have a camera at the time, and I regret it. Hunting just below timberline in a big chunk of dark timber. Middle of the day, bull sounds off. About 1 o'clock in the afternoon, bull sounds off. I'm like, he's dead. If you are in the timber and about noon to 2 o'clock and a bull sounds off, that bull's killable. That bull is killable. I'm sorry, that bull is killable. If you can work your way in, keep the wind in your favor, you can call that bull in and kill him. So he sounds off. I'm like, oh, you're dead. So I start making my way, and sure enough, a second bull. There's 2 bulls side by side. So I'm like, there's no way. There's no way. There's no way.
Why is he killable? Explain that, because it's happened to that last big bull I killed with Jeremy.
Because
It was cranking at 2:30, screaming his head off.
okay, you've got 2 situations. Either they have cows or they don't have cows. But regardless, they are up on their feet and they're restless. And I can talk about why they might be restless. But it's in the middle of the day and they're curious. They're interested. If he has cows, the beautiful part about that is the cows are probably bedded and they're probably safe. They're secure. He doesn't have to worry about them. So now, well, shoot, I wonder who else is out there. And so they'll start vocalizing. Well, if the cows are there and they're bedded and they're safe, I can take a quick step over here and go check out this lady. Okay, so he's much more likely to leave his cows in a safe location and come check you out. And if he's by himself, he's just bored out of his mind and very curious. And that's why when all of a sudden 2 start going back and forth and they're side by side, 90% of the time they don't have cows and they're bored and they're restless. Done. I'll feed you everything you want. Just come here. And I'll use my targeted strategy. So, long story short, work my way in, get the wind right. Literally, 1 lost mew, he bugles, couple assembly mews, bam, he's in front of me, catches an arrow, falls down dead. So, meanwhile, his buddy is still bugling. I'm like, this is awesome. All right. So I'm literally boning, I'm quartering at my elk, and this other bull is doing laps around me, just screaming his head off. Now, granted, he's gone around me, he's smelled me. I know he has smelled me, unless that his stinky buddy was so bad it covered it up. But regardless, that bull's got to know something's wrong, all right? His buddy just shut up. There's a human scent in the area, but he's still bugling. All of a sudden, here comes a guy walking up the ridge, or walking up the slope towards, here he comes, and he lays out a bugle. And this is, I don't remember, but it's probably the first week of season. and he just screams on this bugle. Real bull. Zip! Shuts right up. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? I'm just kidding. It's dead quiet for, I don't know, 5-10 minutes. And all of a sudden, real bull starts bugling again. It's quiet. Bull starts, bull's bugling, bull. Here's the other hunter again. This time he's closer. Wow! Zip! Bull shuts up. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Literally, this goes on while I'm about done processing every time he's just moving, and the guy is just slowly moving his way closer and trying to jog. At some point, finally, this bull starts he's just bugling a little bit more. This guy's bugling more. This bull, and I just did yell at the top of my lungs. I'm like, just use a cow call. Just the bull would have run him over if he had just switched to a cow call. All right? So don't get yourself locked in. And Aaron and I have talked about this. There's an adage that says to the person who only has a hammer, the whole world starts to look like a nail. All right? If all you have is one tool, every problem, every project, every task that you have to encounter, you only have one tool. So you're going to try to make that tool fit. If all you have a hammer and you need a wrench, well, it doesn't matter how hard you bang on the thing, it's not going to loosen up. And then, quite honestly, you're going to damage the head of that nut bad enough to where now a wrench won't work. All right? Broaden your abilities, and for me, if you're like me and you like to call or you want to be able to call, have a full toolbox. And what he's saying is absolutely right. Don't get yourself locked in to where all you have is a bugle and you want a bugle. Now, Corey does a great job, but he has also said he will walk by 10 bulls to find the one that's willing to play his game. Like I said before, I'm the opposite. I will play whatever game that bull wants to play. You want to play that? Done. You want to play that one? Sure. Why not? And I'll just kill him. But where I hunt, they are heavily pressured. They have escape. They can go down to private, or they can go somewhere else, or go down into some nastiness that I don't want to follow him because I don't want to carry the elk out. I don't mind going in there and hunting him as long as he's on call or my horses are on call to come in and get it. But I try to really be efficient in what I do and very targeted in what I do, because the other flip side, and it all makes sense, but the other flip side of that is if you go in and you work an animal and you are a little bit more cautious to start, if you slip in and you work him and it doesn't work out, you just don't call him in. As long as you know what you're saying and why you're saying it and how you're saying it, and you do it accurately and realistically, you can slip in and you can work that animal. It doesn't work. You can back out and wait till the evening. Or you go in that afternoon hunt and you go do the exact same thing. It doesn't work. You can back out. I can come back in the next morning. And that elk is still in the same spot doing the exact same thing that he's doing because you didn't set him off. All right? And it is. And Aaron's right. I mean, he's been on my website. I mean, there's a lot to it. It's not rocket science, but, I mean...
I would say, though, if you get on his site, especially if you start now, because there's enough knowledge on there to take up a couple of years, take what he says as far as pick up the high notes. Pick up the calls you don't want to use and the ones you do.
Well, and I did, and you may not even seen it because I just posted it yesterday. A couple of you I talked to have seen it. I actually added a couple of introductory videos that actually talk about that, because I'm dead serious. There's 16 now, more than 16 hours of instructional video, and most of it, well, I'll say half of it, is just elk doing what elk are doing. I mean, they're the elk. It's not me flapping my gums. I talk about this, then I say, watch an elk do it, and you argue with them if you don't believe that that's what it does, because I just showed you. Well, it does. It gets a little overwhelming. So I did put a couple lessons in there, or basically game plans for beginners and some game plans for experienced callers, just so you can show how do I pick this apart and get the most out of it in the quickest amount of time. But I'm dead serious. I think a lot of backcountry hunters will have a lot more success if they spend time watching the elk and doing figuring out what those elk are doing, getting a game plan before they just go bombing after them, all right? And then if you do want to get in and you do want to call, if you go in there and you use a very purposeful and targeted strategy rather than just throwing anything at the wall. because otherwise you can blow them out of there and they can move out and be
And
done.
I think a lot of this too, for me, because what I'm kind of making jokes about heavy physical ability, and I walk over and shoot them. That is over the counter tags. When I've hunted or called for guys in like 201, some of the other units like Jeremy and I have hunted, I'll blow a bugle till my lips fall off, and it works every time. The elk are different there. So the other thing that Chris touches on, and if you're not paying attention, it can get a little bit confusing. But the vocalizations, I think, are a hell of a lot more important. The pitch, the actual noise when you're on an over-the-counter tag, because I mean they've heard a hoochie mama a lot.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
and I mean,
It's a good call, but people just.
I don't think it's a good call anymore because every
There
every
you
elk
go.
is
There you go.
like if you know the bully at school is going to kick your butt with his voice, you're probably not going to. Okay, if you hear a hoochie mama and then there comes a couple chuckleheads from Iowa, they're probably going to figure out the call. And I think every probably animal in Colorado has heard a hoochie mama, every elk. And so last year with Joe, a friend of ours, he can't use a diaphragm. He's really unsure of which calls to use because a lot of guys would call those estrus calls right there rather than a reed call. You hear guys hear estrus call because the name's used so much. They get scared. They don't know what to use. So I mean, literally, we would do a short calling sequence of lost calf, cow call back and forth. What I feel is a safe scenario when we were cold calling, and then we'd have this, epic little calling sequence, pretty short, and then you'd hear meow. Yeah, dude, you quit squeezing that. Do it again. Meow. I mean, it just made him feel good to squeeze the call to an annoying point. And we would be walking through the woods, and if I broke a branch or whatever, we would always make like a very soft, like just a cow call, like, yeah, we're elk, so please don't run away. Maybe it doesn't work. It makes me feel good. But as sure as the sun would rise, he's going to squeeze the call every few steps. Maybe every 5, maybe every 10, but literally, meow. And I'm like, finally, I just took the cow call from him, right? I mean, it just got to a point to where common sense would say don't squeeze the call all the time. And it's hard not to use the call. But on over-the-counter areas, to me, like the lost, like the cold calling, there's several different names for it. If we've hunted, we haven't had any responses, we know we're in a good area, there's fresh sign. To a point, a lot of guys, especially if guys are coming out of a state to hunt with me, they're not, in reality, they're not looking to shoot a herd bull. I mean, how many people in here have shot an elk on an over-the-counter tag compared to, left hand you've hunted them, right hand you've killed them? How many? So who's killed one over-the-counter tag? So were you looking for a trophy elk or were you just looking for an elk?
Brownie down.
Exactly.
Okay, so with my calling strategy, it is very conducive to shoot any elk with buddies, considering when I'm hunting up high, it's going to be more conducive to me to shooting a big elk. I can see the elk, I know where the elk's at, more than most likely with some common sense, I'm going to get on the elk, I can shoot really well, not to get into ethics about long distance, I'm not going to poke them out way out there, but I can shoot 60, 70 yards really well. I'd rather shoot one that doesn't know I'm there at 60 or 70 than shoot one scared shitless because my buddy Joe's squeezing a hoochie mama at 40. But that's my philosophy on it. I'll sneak in and I'll shoot him at 70. And every one I've shot that's big has been at 50, 60 yards. They didn't know I was there. I got close enough. They had no idea I was there. Had no chance to duck the string. Now, another elk that I missed, which would have been the biggest one, yeah, we did everything Chris said, called it into the lap, that thing came right to us, and then it saw me, and I shot, and it dropped, and I missed it. If I was smart, I would have shot that thing at 72 yards when it was eating grass. But like a jackass, we had to start calling. Came running right in, 26 yards. I'm at full draw, it's pivoting. I didn't want to shoot it on the run. I hit a tree right here like a dummy. I'm shooting 90 pounds like I always do. I'm trying to lean back. The elk sees me. I should have just shot it where it was standing, and I didn't. And Jeremy's heard this story 400 times. The biggest elk I've ever seen. Well, on an illegal unit I could shoot. Most people are just looking to kill something. So, simplifying a little bit from Chris, you're not going to kill anything if you scare everything around you, and you can call bad enough to scare away raghorns. I see it all the time. But if you get in there and make some simple elk noises and don't do the listen to what he says. Don't make the noises that's going to scare them. Use the noises that take a response. Pretty much anywhere we go, not trophy. I'm not a trophy hunter, but we're probably going to kill an elk. We usually at least get into where we can shoot one a day. The numbers are there. We're physically fit to get to them, and we rely heavily on not doing anything stupid. So, like Chris is talking about, put the bugle away for the most part if you're doing a cold calling setup. Now, we will do an occasional kind of a spike squeal, probably out of boredom. I don't think those hurt anything. Probably don't help anything either. It just makes us feel great. We're packing around a bugle, so we make some noise with it. We just do a very cold calling, very subtle sequence back and forth in hopes some poor dumb 5x5 is going to come see what we're doing, and it generally works. Because there's elk there, and the 5x5 honestly is stupid, and it doesn't know what's going on, so it'll come in. Now, what do you? You're chuckling over there. What are you thinking?
No, you're right.
I'm being really realistic to most of people probably listening. They just want to shoot an elk and get some.
You're right, and all I will say is you're absolutely right. But if you know that the elk are there, there's a couple things, but no, you're absolutely right. If you make realistic sounds, you know, I take it that next step and say, okay, you can sound realistic, but then you can sound, you can know what you're saying. Obviously, you can call almost any elk, especially the younger bulls. I mean, goodness gracious, most of the time I'm passing bulls because I'm looking for a particular bull. Just get the heck out of here. The only thing I'm smiling at is, you know, we're talking about over-the-counter type stuff, and one question that always comes up, and I was going to say we're about 30 minutes, so we can probably turn it over to questions and answers. But the other thing too, I always get it from people talk about is, okay, you go out and you scout this summer. Most of the time I'm doing it end of July, beginning of August, but that's just, I'm up there trying to find where the cow-calf groups are. If this is a new area, I just want to see where the cow-calf groups are because I know at some point the bulls are going to want to go that way. But if you go and you scout in the summer, you find a whole pile of elk, and then you get there opening day or whatever, and you get up there and you're not finding them, and they're not saying a word, and they're just dead quiet, dead serious. People don't understand the value of this. Stay out. Don't go back to bed that night. Stay out an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours after dark. Not after sunset, after dark. When it's pitch black, dark, dark, dark. Stay out and just listen. Because a lot of times where I'm hunting with again, they're pressured. They know that something's not right because they can smell all, you know, they hear all the four-wheelers starting to run the roads that aren't there during the summer. And all of a sudden they smell a whole bunch of people in the woods that wasn't there, you know, 2 weeks ago. They know something's not right. So they can shut right down, or they'll move. I will stay out after dark and listen, figure out where they are. They will get vocal again. Now that they're vocal, now I can say two things. Number one, where did I hear him vocalize the first time? All right? Because that's most likely where he just came out of, which means that's probably where he spent the day and that's where he was holed up. So if I know that and I can take a look, and I'm telling you, nowadays, some people poo-poo it, some people don't. Our smartphones, most of them have the ability to have apps on them, and Google Earth app is awesome. And a lot of our units have the ability to have 3G in some of these areas if you are fortunate enough to do so. Or you at least get a mapping app that sits on your phone to where you can, you know, or satellite imagery or whatever that you can download and keep it on your phone. Figure out where, when you hear him, you know where you're sitting. You can look on, I know I'm sitting on this point. He's this direction. Okay, well, he's got to be over there. Well, I bet you he's in that little pocket of timber. Okay, now the next morning, two things are going to happen. Number one, he's going to probably go back to that spot. I know he's probably going to go back to that spot. But also, he's out in the open alpine. He's somewhere else feeding. Well, what I will oftentimes do is I'll just spend all night listening to where they are. I will slip in the morning, middle of the day with the thermals and the wind currents going everywhere. Sometimes you're just shut down, you can't do anything anyway. Sleep during the day. And then I'll use that morning, you know, in the dark, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, I will use that as an opportunity to work my way over to that spot where he was in his bedding area, and I'll beat him to it. Now, granted, like we talked about earlier, a lot of times those elk will wait till those thermals start shifting. I might not go and stand in his bed because he's going to come in from the downwind side of that, but I might go 100 or 200 yards down on that same parallel, and as he starts dropping in early, I can come in with the wind going left and right. So don't overlook the fact that you use the darkness to your advantage, all right? Again, me, I just humped that 50-pound pack and all my food in, and I'm tired. I don't want to chase them all over the mountain. I found him. I want to kill him. So all right. So I'm gonna do what it takes. I'm gonna take it seriously, and I'm gonna do what it takes to kill that bull. And so if that means me being out there at night, listening and tracking and figuring out where they're going, where they're when they're showing up and who's out there, done. Do it. So, all right. We've been all over that.
Yeah.
So it's 8:30. So let's kick it open to you want to do, where's Grant? Grant. Did you want to do drawing stuff now, or you want to do it after the questions and answers?
Finish up with question and answers and we'll get to the
All right, kick it open. Who's got questions?
You were talking about midday bugles. Do you deal differently with an elk that's giving you the full bugle versus just the kind of the midday growl?
Oh, the bedded bugle versus the absolutely. You the question is do I, and I'll answer it and then I'll pitch it to you. A bull, midday you can hear a bull vocalize and bugle kind of one or two different ways. He's either going to do a full-on bugle and a nice full vocalization, or you'll hear those people call it a bedded bugle or a bedded growl or whatever, where it's not a full-on bugle. It's just a bull letting the cows and anybody else around him know that he's still there. Yes, I will, in the fact that a lot of times, if they do that bedded bugle, and a lot of times it's just and that's just it. I mean, it's low, it's more of a growl. A lot of times, that means that bull is with his cows. He's still with those cows, and he's got his cows here, and he's just letting all the other bulls that probably bedded around him know that, everything's the same. Don't get a squirrely idea now that you're up walking around, okay? Well, in that case, I know that he's probably got cows, and he's with the cows, and so if I'm going to try to work him in a midday hunt, if the wind is right, I'm going to be a lot more cautious trying to move in because I know that there's going to be a heck of a lot more eyes. But if he starts bugling, like just flat out full roll bugling, that tells me he's probably up on his feet. He's probably restless, which means he's probably going to want to come, he's going to be willing to come a little bit further. I'll work my way into maybe 100, 150 yards of him, and I'll just set up. I'll find out where the doorway is, where those corridors are. I'll set up and I'll call him. I'll call him in. So the first one I'm going to have to sneak in really, really close if I want to do it and be careful with the cows. The next one I'll set up back a little bit and I'll make him come to me.
A little bit different for me. The wind is hardly ever consistent, so generally I won't do either. I mean, I will get close enough. This is if the wind's swirling, because the chance of me calling it in before it smells me are pretty slim in the high country. It's not consistent. What we'll do, and it doesn't happen very often anyway, because usually the wind's high enough in midday we can't hear it, or we just haven't been close enough. I'll scoot close enough to where I know he's in point A. I probably already know where point B is. I'll get as close between point A and point B as I can without that thing winding me. He's not going anywhere. When he gets his ass up, we're going to kill him. Now, that's mostly because I have hiked 5 miles in. I do know where it's at. I don't want to scare him out of, the whole area. So for me, the wind is a huge, huge deal. I will get as close as I possibly can until he gets up. Or usually when they get up, I don't know if you ever heard a herd get up, it's not quiet. They usually let each other know, in my opinion anyway, they let each other know I'm up, I'm over here, that kind of a thing. So we'll at least be able to hear it if we're a little ways away. And at that point, we know they're up. If the wind is still bad, we probably know where they're going, so we'll stay close. If the wind is good and we know they're up, then we're probably going to try and call them in.
Yeah, wind is everything. If it's consistent, If it's not, stay out, because you already know where he is. Just stay back. Just stay out. He's He's right. If you know where he is and the wind is bad, don't go in there and blow him out of there, because you know where he's probably going to go.
The wind has a chance to be bad, because you know later on it won't be bad. And that's kind of what I was getting at is, if you know he's there, don't push a bad situation. You know what the wind is going to be good later, and you're not pressured by a ton of people. And I'm a chicken. I don't want to just go in there and have him run off. I wait, generally. But the winds are different everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the cool thing about where I hunt also sucks is usually the winds are pretty crazy. So where they hang out, they feel pretty confident where they're at, because they've got a good track on where the wind's coming and going, which all of them do.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. I was just going to dovetail off that and say most of the time, you'll hear people say, oh, elk bed at this, 2/3 of the way up the mountain, or 3/4 of the way up the mountain, or that elk bed where the wind is the most inconsistent, because they want to be able to smell it. So if the wind is swirling and the wind is inconsistent and moving, that's where they're going to bed, because they can keep track of danger. So yeah, most of the time, midday hunts, with the wind being bad, no. But if it's consistent,
Jeremy and I pushed the bull. It's huge, right? And it did exactly. Remember that in the timber, the huge. And
what unit was that?
in your unit, I know where you hunt too, Abel. But we went in there, and it was exactly the wind was. And this is one of the reasons that specific situation taught me. He and I should have been smart. We should not have went in there. We heard him bugle. We should have waited for the wind to grow. The wind was great for like 80% of the distance to it, and then that last 20%, the wind blew, and we watched the bull get up, and we're like, that really sucks, because it's gone now. We're not gonna that night. He's probably not coming in if he smelled you. Well, if we would have waited 35 minutes, probably. Well, Jeremy was hunting at that point. Probably would have killed a 360 bull. Hell, we got 70 yards from it. With the with where we were at, if we would have waited a little bit, we would have called it in. And that's happened 3-4 different times. One was on a 2,000-yard stock in Sangre de Cristo's on a bull bedded above tree line. There was a rock plenty close enough to get to shoot it. We made it that entire distance. This doesn't have as much to do with calling. And like a dummy, I didn't wait to get in for the wind to get right. I was more focused on pulling a Colton and just getting in there. And then literally that was probably 6,000 feet elevation gain and loss to get to that bull, which was a big bull, for 30, 40 more minutes of patience than I would have killed him.
How often do you guys hunt from spike camps as opposed to just keeping everything on your back and bivvying it?
I hardly ever keep everything on my back. That means you have no idea where the elk are. And I try not to be in that position.
Same. Now, that doesn't mean that I might have my base camp here and I hunt and I know, but all of a sudden I see a big bull peek his head over that ridge and then disappear back, and I go, oh yeah, I'm going after that one, and okay, I'll go minimalistic.
That's one of the reasons I bring a bivvy and do the tarp bivvy setup sometimes. Is I'll take the bivvy, leave the tarp, so I won't die. Because I've had to get my backpack for a bivvy, right? Inevitably, at least 4 to 5 times a year, I'm stuck overnight away from all my gear. Throw the bivvy in, just like he's talking. So I have a little more of a base camp. It's a very small base camp. And then spike out for a day or two from there and come back. But I hardly ever, usually like when we went and hunted Idaho, we backpack hunted Idaho. Oh, it sucked. It was horrible because it was 11 miles into where we went, and we didn't know where the elk were. And I mean, and I've bivvy hunted before, but bivvy hunting and not knowing where you're going, where you have to bring a little extra gear compared to bivvy hunting here, where I can hike and go by Copenhagen and come back in, big difference. So I try to never hunt with everything on my back. Plus, we have spotters, and I got camera gear. Most people are hunting with a 45-pound pack for 5 days. I have that 45 pounds and another 30-pound of camera gear because I'm addicted to photography. So I really try not to backpack hunt now. And he's out of shape, so he's definitely not doing it.
Hey, what's the point of having a six-pack if you don't keep it in a cooler? What else?
How do you guys feel about a Montana decoy?
You want to go first?
I use a heads-up decoy. I don't use a Montana just because it's bigger. I would say that 80% of the time it'll do you no good. That last 20%, I watched it work very well for me, and we killed bulls both times off of it. I do it a little bit different. I put it on when we have a cold calling sequence or we have enough time to set it up. I'll put it to where it is advantageous for me if the bull's going to wind me, in hopes that he sees that decoy. It'll keep him from possibly not circling around to wind me. So I'm going to favor the side to keep him away from catching my wind. Now, I've seen guys on video pop that heads-up decoy up above the brush, and a bull just fire back and then pop it down. But the guy never called the bull in, but the bull was bugling. But I use it more as a distraction than I do anything.
And then, yeah, I like the heads-up decoy as well. Are you familiar with that one? Do you know what we're talking about? Heads-up decoy, basically, it is the neck and the head of an elk, a cow elk, all right? And she's at a profile, and it's got a handle. That handle can either stick in a bow mount, or you can just have the handle, all right? The cool thing about that, and I have used the Montana decoys, for a Montana decoy, I like the elk rump decoy, but he's absolutely right. It's a lot bigger, and it's a lot heavier. And typically you're in a static situation, you're setting it and using that, either to block an elk so he doesn't swing downwind, or sometimes I've seen, and I've done it in the past, where I'll set it behind me and maybe off to the side a little bit so where that elk comes around, he sees it over there, wants to come by me. I don't do that much anymore, only because, and I talk about the fact that once you figure out your setups and you understand that doorway principle and you start thinking about how the elk is moving across the landscape, I would argue 90 to 95% of the time you don't need that decoy and you don't want it because it's gonna lock him up. Let him come. But that little bit where it does help, I like the heads up only because it's very, very lightweight. I can have it strapped to my backpack and I can have it next to me, and if I need to show it to him and make it go away, I can. Or like he's saying, you can strap it, you stick it next to a tree or stick it whatever.
And I'm talking cold calling situations where it's a guess. The doorway's for me out the
Who
window.
knows? Exactly.
I don't know where the doorway
Yeah.
is. I just put that thing strategically from where I'm guessing the elk are coming from to where I'm guessing they'll go to where they won't win me, and it's blind luck where if it works. But when it works, it does.
So yeah, I mean, do you have a Montana decoy now?
Yeah.
Which one is it?
I think it's the September.
Okay, so the one that's got her head down, feeding. That one, in my opinion, is better than the one that has the head up. And that's why I like the elk rump. Because the problem with the decoy is if it's too static and you get a cautious bull, he'll come in and look at it. Well, nothing about a cow elk's head is stationary. Ears are always flicking. Head's always moving. So if you get a real cautious bull, he comes in and sits there and looks and she's just not moving, well, they can just kind of turn and back off. Okay, well the heads up is small enough to where you can, he's using it cold calling, but you can move it and put some motion in it. But the Miss September, at least her head is down, so it makes sense that she's down and she's feeding, and it's a little bit more stationary.
And in my situation, I'm hoping it does stop the elk. Where his, it's a disadvantage. Me, it's a guess, but I'm hoping it comes out, it looks at the decoy, and then I shoot it. Because if I stops to look at the decoy before it wins me, I'm just going to shoot it where it stopped to look at the decoy before it wins me. And I keep the parameters of distance in my mind. I don't want to have 100 yards between me and where it might come out, because that's a poke, right? You don't want to shoot an elk that far.
I've heard that, I guess, a lot of the elk get bad, I think on the north-facing side of the mountain. How true is that? And then if it's somewhat true, how do you hunt them that way?
I don't find that to be
Because
true very often. No,
No,
they've had
Have you
where-
ever heard that, though?
Oh yeah, oh no,
yeah.
absolutely. People, and that's why I said what I said earlier. I mean, people say, "Oh, this is where they bed." Well, okay, if an elk beds on the north side of the mountain, what if the whole ridge runs north-south?
Right.
So they're going to bed in a spot that it's protected, it's safe, and it has good wind diversity where they're going to be safe.
last year when I came back from the territories, I had like a 4-day window to hunt, and there's an area that I specifically go to because it's all south facing. You see the whole thing and all the elk bed on all the south facing slopes. You go on the other side of it, there's not an elk to be found. They're on that south facing slope. One, the food's better where they're at right there. Two, they can see forever, where they're in those situations, and the wind swirls more for whatever reason on that side of the mountain. They're the safest there. And so, and that's like, one time we saw 180 elk on the hillside in one day, and they all slept where, literally right out in the open, we watched them, they never walked in the timber one time. So they were on the fringes.
And most of that's because of habitat. I mean, a lot of that original thought, that schools of thought, it came out of Wyoming, even some Montana and some Idaho areas where you got really dry areas to where the south-facing slope is just tinder dry and there's nothing, and then the north face is nice and dark and cool and wet. Well, of course, they might come out and feed on that south side, but during the heat of the day, they might drop over into.
There's something to it with scouting, I would say, a little bit, as far as when the food pops out, when
Absolutely.
the snow melts. So scouting, I definitely bounce off of the north to south facing argument way more than I do. I don't even worry about it when I'm hunting at all. And not only that,
And
I
I
don't like
don't.
to piss around in bedding areas. I'm not. You hear some professionals talk about sneaking into bedding. I don't mess around with that. I wouldn't want somebody to come in my living room. I probably wouldn't come back to the house that night without police. So elk probably aren't coming back to their bed either if you come through it. So. What?
No. Hey, if the wind is consistent, I say it's all fair game. And so if I know they're in there and the wind is consistent, I'll slip. If I know they're in there
Oh.
and the wind is consistent,
Yeah.
I'll call that sucker and kill him.
Yeah, no, I was
But
saying,
if
don't-
you're just walking and hiking
Yeah,
and just no,
don't walk through north-facing timber. Yeah, no, I agree with Chris, but you'll hear, the guys that run REI on Wadsworth are actually hunters, the manager and assistant manager. Like, man, I was like, how's your season go? Man, we got into them, and I'm like, and they just walk all day long. Well, them getting into them was them running away, which made them happy, so I don't really, more power to them.
Yeah,
But
they
they're
saw
walking-
they saw elk.
They saw
They
elk.
saw elk.
But they were walking through bedding areas, and they pushed like an entire herd out. I mean, they was like, yeah, they were running everywhere. We almost got a shot. And I was like, where were you? And they explained it. I'm like, oh, was there big scratched out spots? They're like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, you were in their living room. So I don't try to do that.
What else?
It's usually nasty too.
Yeah.
What is your ideas on the effects of weather, more specifically drastic changes in weather? Like some people won't even bother if it's a super windy afternoon or evening, or it just started pouring that day.
Well, for me, if I'm 6 miles back in, I'm gonna hunt.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And now, obviously, if it's just absolute torrential downpour, rain, and just nasty, I might hole up in my tent for a day. But the elk are there. I mean, that they are. Now, they may not be as vocal and it might not move as much, but I mean, if it's just brutally bad weather where you look out and you're like, there's no way I want to go out there, then okay, maybe I won't go out there and the elk are probably not going to be. But if it's just drizzling or if it's windy, the elk are going to be out there. And sometimes wind can actually be to your advantage, because if it's so windy that it's hard to hear things, it's hard to hear for them too. And a lot of times they'll be more vocal, or more responsive to being vocal. So if you know where they've been and it's just brutal wind, again, if it's consistent wind, if you can work the wind, if it's just doing this, no. But if it's consistent wind, it's just windy, I'll still hunt it. Absolutely, absolutely.
Pretty much the same. Although, I will, if I'm way in there and it's a drizzle to rain, yeah, I'm probably gonna sleep and whatever, talk to myself or whatever, because I don't really want to get wet. I probably need to rest by then anyway. I'll probably eat like a horse all day long and then hit at it. Colorado doesn't rain all day hardly ever, so different than, of course, he's used to horses, right?
So that's probably why I get tired. I'm
Yeah, I mean, I'll usually sleep it out or just lay around. If it's every day, I mean, I want to kill something, but usually if it rains, I'm pretty happy to sleep, so I'll chill.
What else? Nothing. Answered everybody's questions. All right, man. Well, Grant.
I told you, talk enough.
Hey, you still have time. Don't give me that. We got done early.
Ready to start giving stuff away?
Go for it, man.